Mr. President, I want to thank Senator Draheim for doing an admirable job of doing the motion that I screwed up before. So, we all can learn from each other on those procedures. And, Mr. President, I hope we all can learn from each other on the contents of this bill and why I think that we should actually support Senator Draheim. I had a few thoughts. Was it only yesterday we talked about this bill? And I'm not going to repeat them, although I'm going to have a little bit of new information about what this bill is going to do if it sits the way it sits, which is why it should go back and actually be properly funded. But first, I just want to allude to Senator Pappas's comment, implying that perhaps somehow I was dilatory in my work here, and there's actually it's Rule Number 121, Subdivision 2, Mr. President, that says you shouldn't question the motives of members. We don't have to agree, but please don't question my motives as I'm being dilatory. Mr. President, I am desperate, and the work on this bill, coupled with work on others' bills, is going to cause very desperate times in the area I've spent most of my recent time in the human services, long-term care, nursing home, assisted living arena. And funny thing, Mr. President, you're a chair, and if you called up, they would give you information. I don't even know who to call these days. They're all busy with stuff, and so I was just doing the best I could do to calculate what the impact might be. So I ran off my own budget sheet, and I couldn't find the detail. But I can tell you, Mr. President, the impact on nursing homes, group homes, and disability services is at least $120 million from this safe and sick time, mostly because most of these places don't have the funding to do it. Now, they would wish they could. They are trying to raise their rates to wages to the people as best they can, draining their reserves, doing their best to care for their employees, who they love. And, Mr. President, these employees are amongst the most dedicated. And if anybody on earth deserves the freedom that this earned safe and sick time would provide, it's this group. And there's no people that are running an operation that would like more to do this. And, Mr. President, I don't know why that this bill didn't come to the floor with the Senate version, which actually funded this key part of the bill. And so the Senate, in its wisdom, said we better pay for this. Mr. President, my best calculation, and I will admit that it's rough, is about $120 million a year impact to the industry that we represented. There's 300,000 employees, nursing homes, group homes, day services, et cetera, and some are able to provide this, and they absolutely are pleased that they can do that, but most simply cannot. And this is something that needs to be discussed. And when you bring in the House version, which has no funding, and Mr. President, there is funding in this bill, and it's for compliance. So if you haven't complied, they will make sure you know that, and even perhaps take away your license to operate. So there you go. And Mr. President, as a package, I had no say, Mr. President, deciding what the targets were. I'm not sure if you were at the meeting, but these people that represent you were at those meetings, and you and I usually sit in the back row and wonder what's going on. Like, who thought that was a good idea? But, Mr. President, I don't know if you remember, but there was a $17 billion surplus, and then with the spending that's been picked up with the Senator Ref's tax bill and sales taxes and other things and other bills, there's like $26 billion. And I've always been kind of good at math, Mr. President, and I've just been, I thought $17 billion was a lot, like a lot, especially, but $26 billion is even more. And so imagine my surprise when in the money that would pay, in the fund that would pay the nursing homes and group homes and assisted livings and day services, the money to cover this cost, which I'm imagine was discussed thoroughly in the conference committee, even though I wasn't there. But if, Mr. President, had I been there as one of the members who voted for both bills, I could have brought this up, and maybe they could have realized, oh my, what are we doing? That's a different discussion. We discussed it pretty thoroughly yesterday, but I just wanted to remind you, Mr. President, that I was eager and willing to be a part of that discussion. But having not been a part of it, having maybe it didn't come up, I need to remind the body and maybe encourage the members on your side of the aisle that this is a problem. And I don't know if you're aware, Mr. President, that in the bill that's going to fund nursing homes in particular, there's a $100 million loan program and then some random grants that are going to maybe amount to $20 million. And so when the money that left this body to pay for nursing homes left this body, there was $125 million in state money to pay for that, which is not as good as it was coming back. And so if indeed, Mr. President, and the best estimate I got is that nursing homes, on that $120 million have a $50 million hook, that's a $200 million impact that this item alone will have on nursing homes. And, doing the math, if you have a $200 million bill and even $50 million to pay for it on this one item, that's going to be a problem, especially if you're already at risk of closing. Now, Mr. President, you were on my committee for one cycle, and it was really good to have you there. We talked about nursing homes, and they have other expenses besides this one. Did you know that? So they don't just have to pay for the earned, safe, and sick time. They actually have to pay for paid family leave, which is also worth 1%. So that's another $25 million a year that's going to come out of their money, which begins to add up after a while, Mr. President. And, they also have heat, and they also have other expenses that they might have. They may have to repair their buildings. They may actually have buy new tables for some of the dining rooms. And so, Mr. President, I don't understand what the thinking is on your side of the aisle. Not questioning your motives, I just don't understand the rationale where somebody thinks, not you because you were in the back row with me, is thinking that if we layer a number of burdens on groups that have no money already, that are already at risk of closing, how that's ever going to work. And the two examples I gave you, Mr. President, that's a $75 million a year or $300 million a biennium liability, for which they're going to get at the most $150 million. And I don't know how that works. I don't know. And so to credit Senator Hoffman, in the negotiations, we tried to get more money. If anybody's been outspoken more than him on I need a bigger target to handle the nursing homes and group homes, it's been nobody more than him, Mr. President. And sad that he was unsuccessful to persuade whatever leadership is running this place, between the governor's office, who does not understand this problem, Mr. President. We've been talking to them for 2 years, begging them to please notice. And over the last couple of years, 50 nursing homes have closed. No, we don't need them. Oh, Mr. President, we do. You understand this of anybody, because there's 50 or more people at HCMC currently trying to get out to go to a nursing home or a facility so they don't have to tie up a bed for some emergency case. And it's not a matter of money. I had a rich guy friend who was trying to go in the hospital for a significant procedure, and this guy is not like without means. This guy had to wait a day and a half. So it's not a matter of just buy your way into a bed. There aren't beds. And, Mr. President, I have long argued that people who are medical assistants should have equal access to all those services that anybody has. So what are we going to do? We're going to find a way to close more nursing homes because of this singular item than almost any other thing we've done. And then it failed to do in terms of spending the money. And so there's another bill coming up where we're spending money, squandering money on wonderful, marvelous, kind of nice projects, while the urgency, the meat and potatoes in Minnesota's government, or services that we have to have, are being ignored. And, Mr. President, when you close more nursing homes and don't have places to go, do you know what happens? Not just fiscal ruin, people come to harm. And I know you, Hippocratic oath, above all, do no harm. I mean, that's what you swore, and I swore a similar oath. And I know that nobody here wants to do harm, but I'm pointing out there must be a place that people are not understanding the impact of this bill. Because they're going to spend 2 times the money because of this that they're getting. And I don't know how that works out with the math, Mr. President. And so if anybody is listening to my voice besides in the public, and they'd better be watching, how do you spend $17 billion and come up with some of the poorest programming and fail to solve some of the most grievous issues in Minnesota? Well, look at the model we got here. Look at the targets, the way they've been set up. And it's not just in this area, but I'll limit my thoughts to this topic and related to this bill. But, Mr. President, that is the definition of very poor thinking. And when we ran at the doors, we thought we're going to work together. We're going to make a point to solve. We are going to care about seniors, Mr. President. One Minnesota, from cradle to senior to all the way to whatever comes after that, and to enjoy your golden years. And so that you know, that I know as a person who, my mother might need to go to a nursing home. She just turned 96, and we had a nice brunch together on Mother's Day. But I hope she never has to go to a nursing home, and my dad didn't have to go because we cared for him. But some people have not got that opportunity. And so they want to know, one of the duties and one of the guaranteed things that's an entitlement, Mr. President, in federal law is you get to go to a nursing home. Well, you can't go to one if there's not one there. You can't go to one if there's not staff to serve the individuals. And, Mr. President, there are beds available. And so if you want to go and have your brother or sister tend to you in one of those beds, they're available all over the place. But that's not really practical. So we hire staff. But the places that have closed beds are because they don't have any money to pay their staff. And if you read the layaways that are going in nursing homes, Mr. President, where they close a bed because they can't afford to run it, it's the equivalent of dozens and dozens of nursing homes. And so I don't know, Mr. President, why my limited comments yesterday haven't gained any traction. Perhaps today, members are listening on your side of the aisle to agree that with everybody on our side of the aisle, this should go back and get more work. I am not opposed to this. I think it's a great program. And I think that people who are needing to take care of their own health and get their broken tooth fixed, help their sick child, need the opportunity to go and have this. But, Mr. President, it has to work. And if I can change gears to a second topic, Mr. President, if that's all right. But I just, on that, I'm just desperate. And if you ask the people in the hallway that represent nursing homes, you call up your own nursing home. I invite every member of this body to call up any nursing home in their district and ask about that. Mr. President, the second thing that I got a call from a former superintendent of Anoka was about this bargaining piece, and where it's going to put class size into the bargaining. And we'll discuss this more when the education bill comes up, but I'll mention it in brief here, Mr. President, that it's a unique thing. Actually, the same bill also has a nursing home. I'll take a step back. This has a nursing home standards board, which I am an author of. And I think that sometimes we need to find ways to help nursing homes treat their employees better, make sure that you ring the bell and it's called. But now we're sitting in the same bill, we have a group that's going to set standards, and we're going to unfund them by 50% and take money away. So when this group decides we need to have more staff, they aren't even going to be open. So we just got to learn what we're doing. And in the same way, Mr. President, in a way that's going to affect schools, is this bargaining piece, which 2 members at least, and other members had concern about, voted to not do because it's just a bad idea. And instead, the conferees agreed to accept the House position, which I do not understand. But he just called me this morning, Mr. President, which is why I just thought of it now at the end of my chat, so it's in part 2 of it now. And so in the bill that's proposed to be bargained over by this bargaining thing where you can do class sizes and so on, various elements that are now at the bargaining table, in the bill that's going to be supporting that money, it's a 4%, 2%, and a 3%. And, Mr. President, the money that is going to be available net to my district, because of that, the unemployment's funded for 1 year, so that's really good news. But in year 2, it's going to cost them 3% to pay the unemployment, and it's going to cost them 1% to pay the family leave. And so the target really is going to be 3 minus 2 minus 1 minus 1. And then based upon that money, when we're spending $6 billion, the largest spending ever, we're going to take that to the bargaining table, and the teachers, who I am a big fan of, Mr. President, I tried to get Rule 90, if you remember, because I want to help them stay in teaching. Twice I tried, and since 2001. So they're going to go to the bargaining table, and they're going to have almost no money to support the second year of the contract because of an element in that bill. And that's why 2 of your members, Mr. President, said, this is not a good idea. Instead, let's just take it up as a dialogue and work together. Mr. President, the choices of the majority are going to have consequences in Minnesota, and they're not good consequences. And this bill, and I have a lot of regard for Senator McHugh, and I voted for that bill leaving the floor. I told you that. Even with most of the stuff there, thinking they'd kind of work it through, and like parts of the Senate bill. But, Mr. President, it came back, and it's going to cause grievous harm to nursing homes and to group homes and disability service providers. And so when you get a call from your constituents saying, how come my group home is closing? They were fine. My nephew, my brother, has been so happy there. The people that vote not to send this back, look in the mirror. Because that's how it happened to be. The people that were in their caucus and didn't speak up and say, I can't vote for that bill because it hurts too many people. I don't care if you vote against it today on the floor, but in the caucus, Mr. President, that's when you make these decisions. That's when people go, what are you thinking? That's when us backbenchers have a chance to say, hey, group that was negotiating, have you thought about this? We're going to do a number of things like this, Mr. President. So at the end, we will spend $17 billion of a surplus and have a poorer state to show for it. Not one Minnesota. It's going to be -1 Minnesota as we try to keep our basic services open and serving the seniors and the children that we are so sworn to serve. So, Mr. President, I urge members to vote yes on the Draham motion. That was very well done, and thank you.